Okay, so today I'm on the air with Oreo, who's a fellow left-wing person in Twitter/YouTube spheres. Um, and as a fellow black person, I thought it'd be good for us to have a a nice all black stream. Would be good, wouldn't it? There you go, Oreo. You want to introduce yourself?
All right. Hi, my name's Oreo. Uh, I'm I guess you could say, bread tuber, because that's what like the official name of like, I guess, left wing YouTube is now. I'm 19 years old. I mostly make like content from a leftist perspective. So, and I'm also
Yeah,
on Twitter a lot too.
yeah, absolutely. When this is finished, I'll implore you to go and follow him because he's a very good account, I find. Um, so I'm just gonna move out of the way. Um, no, it's I find it interesting actually, like the whole bread tube thing really, because while I like sort of also you know make and post things in that vein, I always think of myself like not quite as qualified to hold the position of like bread tuber because I don't really make videos.
Yeah, I just call myself that because I mostly make like I guess you could say left leaning content. I also consider myself a leftist too. So
Yeah,
I guess that's why I give myself that title. Like I'm really not sure if like I'm amongst the ranks of like bread tubers or whatever.
yeah. Well, that's the thing though, because I've obviously I'm subscribed to you, and you actually edit and script your videos and stuff, which
Yeah.
is a lot more effort than I put into mine. I think like I didn't even like, the most editing I think I've ever done was because my phone ran out of storage, so I had to literally copy in another video like to the end of where the previous one was, which was just
Mhm.
a sign of the high levels of quality that I have on my channel. Um, but no, it's I think it's in terms of red tube and large, it's nice to have a growing movement of people willing to sort of talk about things to do with a
Mhm.
left wing perspective, like on the internet, especially after so long a period of just having reactionary, right to far right wing people sort of
Yeah.
trying to dominate the conversation.
Yeah, because I was talking with S Man last night, and he said that I think that the election of Donald Trump it kind of hurt the anti SJW right wing side of YouTube because after that it was like Donald Trump would do blatant things that were by like many indefensible, but for some reason they always found a way how to defend him. And I guess, of course, they still have fan bases and stuff like that actually agree with them, but I think for other people, it kind of turned them away from that.
Yeah, I think it's like it's a textbook example of fascism, really, because
Mhm.
I mean, it sounds hyperbolic because of the nature of it, but when you think about it, it's a psychophantic obsession with their figureheads and their sort of ideology. It doesn't matter that Trump is doing really awful things, be it persecuting immigrants or derailing
Mhm.
regulations or scrapping workers' protections or actively demolishing existing LGBTQ rights, because from their
Right.
perspective they've got to sell the whole the rights are winning, Trump's the best and stuff to pay their salaries because their whole job is built off
Mhm.
um, you know bigging up the right and making out like the left is simultaneously like a bunch of losers, but then also like controlling everything. It's like a weird sort of double double board thing, isn't it? Because if you think about it,
Yeah.
a lot of their things are like, oh, no one likes the left. They're all just a bunch of crybabies and stuff. But they're also in control of like the media and the government and every other avenue of society. So they've got to continuously sell the whole like, oh, right wing underdogs. We're the winners and stuff.
Right.
Um,
And you even notice that like because I do have some conservative followers, and that doesn't bother me because I do like talking with a lot of people from like across the political spectrum, whether that's center, right, left. I really don't care, as long as we can get along. Um, but I noticed that among some of my conservative followers, they really think like, because I remember one time I was having a discussion with them about YouTube and the political sphere on YouTube, and I made the point that the right wing has like a sort of like a stranglehold on YouTube in terms of popularity. So you can easily name like right leaning YouTubers, like you could say Stephen Crowder, Ben Shapiro, probably put Dave Rubin in that spectrum now. Stefan Molyneux, Candace Owens, if she still uploads, I think. Even no bullshit, Blair White. You know, there's a bunch of people that you could name that you would associate with the right wing, and then with the left wing, it's just like Destiny, ContraPoints, Philosophy Tube, H Bomber guy, Sean. You know, there's not a lot of like left wing influence. And then they were like, I don't know, man. I'm like, the right looks kind of weak. I'm like, are you kidding me? We've been in this like sort of culture war atmosphere since what, like 2014, uh, at the earliest when Gamergate started. And they've just had a stranglehold on it because they've been able to like I guess have enough time to perpetuate the image of the left just being like SJWs who they don't like to argue with people, you know, they don't like to argue with facts or reason or logic. Like we're the ones that do that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, I think it's a multi-avenue thing, because as much as it is in part, you're right, sort of getting to grips with using a modern platform better,
Mm-hmm.
there's also the side of that fact that you know, fascist ideas and right-wing ideas, they all come from within the system of capitalism. They all still come from the same base of
Mm-hmm.
ideas of conservatism. Fascism itself is a growth, a later stage of the current system of capitalism. Whereas left-wing
Right.
ideas, like I don't know where you personally stand. I think you're social. You're
Like, okay, here's my stance, because like I've been actually progressing, I guess you could say, towards libertarian socialism, or at least anarcho-communism, or syndicalism. Like those are the
yeah
three that I would say I'm starting to go towards. But I guess as of right now, I would probably consider myself a social democrat. um Mainly because I mostly associate with like those policies. Like I agree with most of them, but
yeah
I'm more like going more left
yeah.
now.
But you're heading towards the right direction, aren't you? Like, but no, in terms of like left-wing ideas, what often happens is you see left conflated with liberal. So
Hmm.
what
And
ends up
there's a
happening is
difference.
exactly there's a massive difference. You see people like like H bomber guy, like ContraPoints, like Sean, who are much they're left-wing, they're anti-capitalist. Um, they aren't the same sort of platform that you'll see on, say, CNN or BBC,
Right,
because
right.
at best they can be described as liberal, and maybe occasionally they'll like have someone on who's a bit more left, but they fundamentally are within the status quo. They're very much a
Right.
support of make minor tweaks and doing things within rules and not really questioning anything.
Right. And I
And
kind of
as a
hate that.
result, left-wing people on the platform have to build it up themselves, whereas right-wing people, you look at Dave Rubin, and he's funded by people who are
Yeah.
extremely wealthy. Like you look at these, like Shapiro's another one, Crowder. These people have massive think tanks behind them, funding their ideas, because ultimately these people are just within the capitalist framework, perpetuating very much right-wing ideas of deregulation and a lot of the times like creationism and stuff, and other like nonsense to sort of affect the framework of the country and of the world, um,
Right.
because they're just the latest sort of face to a long-standing right-wing idea. Whereas
Right.
people who are anti anti the current system, anti-capitalist, anti um, unjust hierarchies, they've got to build it up themselves, and you can do it, but it takes more time and more effort, and it's very unlikely that someone's going to be like, oh, here's $1 million to fund your whole channel for a year or whatever.
Right. I was going to point out like your point about fascism, because I've seen a lot of right wingers. They're like, oh, fascism and communism, they're the same thing. Well, no. They're I would say like they're both responses to capitalism, but their approaches are very different. So communism is basically in response to like the unfair treatment of the worker under a capitalist system, versus fascism, which basically seeks out to blame like brown people.
Mm.
So it's like they're both responses to capitalism. It's just that one is more based on like I guess the treatment of workers, and the other one is just based on like race and stuff.
Well, I would I mean, I mostly agree, but I sort of disagree as well, because
Hmm.
fascism and capitalism both have the same sort of principles at their core. They're both about hegemony. They're both about building yourself above the other.
Right,
Fascism
right,
is like a later development of that, in which the hegemony that you're building utilizes things like race, things like gender, creates the other, and makes you manipulate and abuse the other in order to better yourself. For instance, to use the example of Nazi Germany, Hitler
Hmm.
was so popular with capitalists because he provided many solutions to the problems that the capitalist market was facing. So, for instance, the decay of the economy, Hitler created a massive pool of free labor, people who were imprisoned in concentration camps and labor camps who could do the work of the capitalists for no wages, essentially, because they're prisoners. Hitler gets rid of the people who were criticizing the conditions of capitalism. So, socialists and communists
Right,
get
right.
banned. At the same time, he's removing, populations like the Jewish people. He's annulling them completely, taking their, property and stuff, and taking the things they had and giving them back to, not giving them back to, what am I saying? Giving them to, not other Nazis and stuff. They're bigging their own power up by removing other people, annulling the power of labor, and consolidating control, which is ultimately what capitalism is about. Holding as much capital as possible, holding as much power and control as possible.
Right.
So, fascism, while it is a response, it is a reaction to the
Hmm.
things that capitalism creates. It's fundamentally born and acted upon by the same people.
Right.
It's the capitalists that support fascism ultimately, because fascism is good for business.
Right. That's what I was like trying to argue. I just couldn't like get it out.
It's all right. It's important to signify that fascism is fundamentally born of that right-wing idea of society. It's born of the idea that hegemonies are natural and good, which is why you see these white supremacists saying like, oh, the white race must be on top because we're naturally our genes are better.
Yeah.
It's all to us. We see it as obviously like rubbish, and to most people it is. But the way they operate is by utilizing those frameworks of, like, you see, how often do you see the whole, oh, in white countries IQ is higher and we're wealthy and all that sort of nonsense, um, because it builds upon the same capitalist ideals of, oh, if you're wealthier then you're better, if you've got more then you are a better person, you made your way to the top, you deserve to be at the top of a hegemony. It's along those similar lines, and that's in part why it's you see lots of people sort of believing far right ideas, because if you're already sort of in tune to the capitalist set of ideals, then you've got fascists have a leg up, they've got that sort of advantage, and it's easier to co-opt people to then moving further right.
Hmm.
Like, do you what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. What am I going to try to say here? Um, yeah, I can't think of anything to add on to that. I agree. Yeah, I was trying to say that it was like it's a reaction, but it's also a continuation of like the capitalist system
Yeah,
because like if you look at like the frameworks of Nazi Germany, like they actually privatized railways and I think even unions were. I'm not sure if unions were privatized, but I know like they weren't in benefit for the worker, so
they
to
were
speak. They were,
outlawed.
yeah, they were
There
like,
was there was one union, and it was like the Nazi union, and it was essentially just like the
right,
like the club basically that you could join
right.
to
It
show
wasn't
your
meant to
allegiance
benefit the
of Europe.
worker. It was like more so meant to benefit the state.
Yeah, well, exactly. Um, just another way of the Nazis consolidating power. Um,
Right.
touching upon those themes of how fascism is born of capitalism and how right-wing ideas are one and the same within the two. I think it's important also because I'm sure you've come across this before. A lot of conservatives insist that, oh, I'm not a Nazi, and just call everyone you see a Nazi, and that sort of
Yeah. Yeah.
obsession with like the idea that everyone is being called a Nazi. Um, and I actually don't think it matters whether or not someone is or isn't a Nazi, in such, because what the whole purpose of the argument is saying, we're not those far right people. Our ideas are fine because we are not those Nazis. Therefore, you calling us that is fine. Um, but it's pointless, because what that does is that allows people to move the conversation right by saying, oh, that over there is the unacceptable stuff, but this stuff that we're doing, which is also quite far right, is fine because we're not Nazis. Um, when in actuality, fascism, because it's a natural continuation of right wing ideas, it's inherently found within sort of all right-wing ideas to a degree, and those degrees
Mhm.
continually escalate and increase as time progresses, as capitalism becomes harder to operate, because obviously to have infinite growth isn't possible. Therefore, naturally, the way in which capitalists operate to obtain their growth, to obtain their capital, become more and more direct and dire, and thus it becomes natural for those right-wing ideas and politicians to start becoming more extreme. So when you see people, trying to cut back regulations even further, trying to um, destroy the already minuscule existing regulations that protect the economy, um, that's an example of the fascist mode of existence, in which any barrier to obtaining capital is annulled. I'm trying to think of some more than that. I've had a bit of a mind blank. What else can we think of? Like the labor protections being destroyed, and striking
Mhm.
rights being annulled, and I saw recently the pipeline protesters. Some of them are facing
Yeah.
massive time in jail. Um, it's not good, but it's an example of the right wing system in action, in which capital matters above all else. And while most people say, oh, it's not good that those protesters were arrested and are potentially going to have like half their life in jail, the capitalist says, oh, they were an obstacle to that oil company making more profits. Therefore, bin them off in jail, ban anyone else from doing it, under threat of a long jail sentence, and the profits roll in. That's what's happening, and that's why it's so important to recognize that all right-wing ideas are contributive to that problem.
Right. Um, what am I trying to bring? Oh yeah. So, what do you think about the straight pride parade that's going to happen in Boston? I think it's a bunch of nonsense.
It is nonsense. It's actually a bit insulting, really. I think when you've got society that is built upon centuries of cis heteronormativity of just um, LGBTQ people being erased
Right.
and banned, and that's only just sort of coming. It's only very recently that we had proper rights and protections, which are actually being erased by the Trump administration and by other places.
Right. Wasn't it recently like with HUD? They said that they were gonna. God, I'm trying to figure out how to work this. They were going to basically deny equal access to trans people to like homeless shelters.
Yeah,
So I think it was like to certain areas within the shelter, or even like if a trans person tried to go into a shelter, like let's say that's ran by like Christians, they could deny them access. And I'm
absolutely.
like, that's not right.
It isn't right at all, and that already exists for I think home ownership, adoption centres, loads of like things that would
Mhm.
be normal things in any normal society, but in this society, LGBTQ people aren't being allowed it,
Right.
and you already see the abysmal attitudes towards LGBTQ people from people Trump and stuff, and within that movement. Um, and then you got these straight people saying, "Oh, we want to have a straight pride parade." Um,
Yeah.
it's like you've never, under at any point in your life, no one's ever been like, "Oh, you are straight, therefore you will not have access to this. Therefore, I will intimidate you. Therefore, X, Y, Z." Um,
Right.
it's like just the other day, I was reading about this lesbian couple who were attacked because they refused to, entertain these scumbags who were like trying to get them to make out or
To
whatever.
kiss. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's like, can you imagine that ever happening to a straight couple? Like for them being straight? It's like, no, that would
Now I will
never.
say this though, like there are some straight couples, like let's say like interracial couples, who because I was actually on a train one time. I think this was when I was in senior year of high school. I was like on the train going home, and I was sitting next to like this older like white lady, and across from me, like in front of me, it was an interracial couple. I really didn't pay them any attention because I'm like I don't really care, but like they were like whole they like the guy had his arm around the girl's shoulder and like they kissed. It wasn't like a like like a, I guess, long kiss. It was more like a peck.
Yeah.
And she just like had a look of disgust on her face, and I'm like, what the hell? Like they're just let them be. Like they're not
Yeah.
bothering anybody.
Well, I think that's a good example of how sort of racism, essentially, is the word,
Right,
what I'm looking for.
right.
Like that's I guess an example of they were straight, but they're
Hmm.
black and white. It's like in many people's
Right.
minds that's a type of problem. Um, but what I more meant to say, and I think you're saying that as well, is that in the case of no straight person gets attacked for being straight. Like if that
Right,
makes sense.
right.
Like no one in that situation, that old lady was looking in disgust because maybe
Because they
they're
were straight, it was just like they were two different
yeah,
races. Yeah.
or maybe they're really like anti contact or something. They just like don't like any sort of
Mhm.
any sort of love shown outside the bedroom or whatever, even if it's literally just a peck on the cheek or whatever. um but no, yeah, you're right. It's like it's an example of racism. But going back to the straight pride parade, um I think they've got Milo Yiannopoulos as like
Uh,
a scheduled speaker there, which sort of just gives you an indication of what kind of people are going to this parade. It's like when you're hiring someone who's like what was the whole like pedophilia thing? Like, didn't he like defend? Um,
yeah, I think it was he defended pedophilia. I
yeah,
think.
and among the other things he's done, like he had like that what's it called, that rally where he showed the address or something of like a
Hmm.
undocumented immigrant and tried to get ICE to like come and go after him, which is pretty disgusting. The constant yeah, he that's the thing as well. He mailed or not, he mailed, he sent $14.88 to a Jewish journalist, which, like, if that isn't the biggest dog
Oh
whistle,
shit.
like, it's ridiculous. He does all these clearly like far right things. He is a far right activist, and he's come into the straight pride parade, and it's like it's very obvious what this parade is all about. Just a way of
Right.
mocking LGBTQ people, and the fact that there's so many people who would genuinely sort of believe that this is a necessary thing, that actually believe that somehow there's like a queer agenda to destroy the world or whatever.
Yeah,
It's
it's almost like the same talking points that you see amongst white nationalists, like when it comes to I guess the Jewish agenda, or even like I guess like the black agenda or whatever. Because
yeah.
I like I've had I did a whole debate on my channel with the white nationalists. I don't know if you saw that or not, but
I don't think I'd have to have a look for it.
yeah, I remember we had a conversation in private once. We actually had multiple like debates in private before doing the one that was public. But I remember him saying, like, "Oh yeah, black people. Oh yeah, there's like they want to kill us and stuff." And I'm like, "Well, no, I'm black. I don't want to kill you. I'm like, I hate you because you're a white nationalist, but I wouldn't say I want to kill you, but like, um, I was trying to get him to see like, that's not every black person. Like it's probably like I'd say like a small minority of black people that want to kill a white person regardless. But besides that, like no, nobody really wants to kill you. There's no agenda out against you.
Yeah. Well, it is exactly. It's like it's just when you look at it with any modicum of logic, it's like what world are people just running around trying to want to like, oh yeah, I want to kill the whites or whatever. It's just nonsense. But it speaks volume to the networks of instilled propaganda and stuff that makes them think like this. And actually, to some degree, it links back to capitalism to some degree. Because if you go back to LGBTQ people for a second, their existence contradicts the whole like the fascist idea of man, woman, and children in a patriarchal family unit and stuff, where
Right,
like
right.
the man's going out and making the money for the household, woman's doing the household work and raising the children. Um, if you've suddenly got people who are gender fluid and non-binary, and maybe they don't have same sex, sorry, they don't have different sex attraction, they want to be married to someone who's the same sex as them, or they're polyamorous, or any of the different variants of sex and gender and stuff, then that model doesn't work.
Right.
And thus naturally these bigots try and frame it as, oh, they're unnatural, they're destroying the family,
Right.
they're destroying the West.
It goes against
Um,
the idea of like the natural order.
yeah, exactly. Which is why you see so much effort put into debunking trans people, because the idea that we're not defined by these ridiculous, like, rigid, unscientific categories would destroy their whole narrative. So that's why they spend so much time, harassing trans people, trying to get them out of the public sphere, trying to, actively stop them from using normal functions like a bathroom and stuff. And we go back to this whole patriarchal model, and we think, well, why have that model? Because it allows men power over others. It allows them to say that they get control of their wealth, of their capital, over their wife and stuff, and in fact their wife becomes part of their capital, because it's like it's a symbol of status.
Right.
But it's like I see it as an intersection, an intersection of two different bigotries, all in the name of maintaining capital. And like you were talking about, how with the whole, like, whites, the blacks are going to kill all whites nonsense.
Yeah.
Your white supremacist friend was talking about. That is another example of that, because it's like, their whole idea of the race war. They can't have a logical sort of view of race as just, it's just a thing in society. It's a social construct that, you know, obviously we all fall under, but it's a social construct. It's nothing more than that. We're not defined by, like, oh, I am black, you are white. Like, there's no tribe there. But for white supremacists, they have to instill that into them, because then it allows them to say, oh, if you're not careful, the black people will take your place, and you'll lose your power.
Right.
So they naturally have to say, oh, the whites must stick together and stop the blacks, as a means of maintaining the hegemony they want to keep, because obviously the centuries of racism, both structurally and, like, societally, is slowly, like, over the last sort of 100 years or so, it's decreasing, and they want to obviously curb that. They want to return it back to the whole, like, slavery days and stuff.
Yeah, I'd even say that's like mostly the driving force behind ethno-nationalism is sort of like that I guess tribalism. So it's like even with like black nationalists, you'll see it. It's like, oh yeah, we need to basically take care of our own people, and like so the whites won't get us or something like that. That's why I kind of see ethno-nationalism as not being like a good model for society to go under, because I feel like if you want to have a functioning society, then you're going to have to mostly interact with people who are like of other different cultures or of other different backgrounds and stuff.
Well, yeah, like, ethno-nationalism is just like it's horrendous to me in particular, I think, because, like, I'm mixed race. Like, my dad's white, my mum's black,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea that, like, I I would literally wouldn't have been born if such a society existed today.
Right.
But, like, as a whole, we shouldn't be playing into sort of fascist ideas, racist ideas of society, of like, oh, the races must be separate. We should be saying, actually, we're all human. We're race is a social construct. There's no real reason to divide us by that, other than
Right. I think
just
like
made
the
up
one thing
bigotry.
that could debunk that whole theory is I was reading there was these two scientists, and they were both European. I forgot their names though, but it was two European scientists, and they wanted to compare their DNA with an Asian scientist. So, I think they did it via saliva, and they found out that both of them have more in common with the Asian scientists in terms of DNA than they do between themselves,
Yeah,
which is what they thought would happen. Like they thought like their DNA would be common between themselves versus the Asian scientists, but that was proved wrong.
well, exactly. Like, humans are such, like, they're so complex. There's so much more to us than just basic things like our skin color. Like,
Hmm.
there's we shouldn't be dividing ourselves by such poor mediums, and ultimately such divisions come down to maintaining the power of one group over another, which is a core of right wing hegemonic views, which is why, if you think about it, like, so much of the far right racist attitudes come from ideas that have been passed down from right-wing organization. So you look at what Republicans were doing in America with like, firstly, states' rights and stuff, and,
Yeah,
the Southern strategy and stuff, and like maintaining those lines of poverty. And then you look at the gerrymandering and the mass incarceration, those right-wing sort of structural,
right.
we call
Private
them faults.
prisons. Yeah.
We call them faults, but they're really designs, because it's like, you can't accidentally end up with a massive population of people living below the poverty line and incarcerated for like doing recreational drugs and stuff, and like things that really shouldn't be punished by society.
Right.
That's a design. And then on top of that, the prison system, the prison for profit system, is a massive contributor to the capitalist economy, which
Yeah, it
provides
is.
a pool of exactly, a pool of cheap labor for capitalists to exploit. And it's like, well, it's not by accident that that's happening. That's a design of the capitalist economy. It all links back to maintaining power and maintaining capital.
Right. And the way that they try to maintain that system, like with I think it's the corporate uh what is it, corrections? I think it's Corporate Corrections of America. It's something like that, CCA. They're the ones who are mostly in the game of like with the private prisons. And actually they bring in a lot of revenue. I think on average, it's over $1 billion in revenue per year. Um, and you'll see right wingers mostly try to defend this, like, oh yeah, look at their business model. They're like, oh yeah, we try to help prisoners get jobs and stuff. It's like, if you go deeper than that, the reason why they want to keep doing this is because of high recidivism rates. Like, this is literally what they pitch to like investors. They're like, oh yeah, you want to know how we're going to keep making profit, how we're going to keep making money off these criminals is high recidivism rates. And if you look at the United States in terms of recidivism, it's really high.
Yeah, well, exactly. Um, and it's just like every stage of the system is so bad. Like the whole, people can't afford to post bail, so
Mhm.
off to prison you go. People live in areas of really high policing, and thus they're arrested for
Mhm.
utter nonsense like jaywalking, which is like what civilized society imprisons people for walking incorrectly, or just using a skateboard, or cycling in the wrong place, or crossing a road wrong, or other nonsense which would be passed off as just the part of life in any other place, but it's seen as a criminal act in America and stuff. And then once they're in prison, they have to pay their own way into getting legal help to like appeal their cases, and that's obviously taking time. So while they're in prison to do that, they're having some ridiculously low paid job for Walmart or McDonald's or whoever,
Mhm.
which is obviously benefiting the corporate side of the system. And then with their money, they can then lobby in politics to avoid any change been happening. Hence the maintained system, or maintained effects of segregation and stuff, and going back even further, slavery, by a political system that's fundamentally built on using racism to fund capitalism.
Right.
Like, it's just when you have when you see it all, um, it's just so obvious. And I think drawing us into a big back semicircle, um, that's why these people fund these right-wing YouTubers so much, because if people were actually sort of looking at what we've just been talking about, it's like they wouldn't be right-wing anymore. They'd be like, oh, well, this is wrong, this is unjust, we've got to do something about this. So they fund these people to never talk about that sort of stuff. I mean, instead they talk about like, oh, this blue-haired feminist did this
Yeah,
week.
like who cares about like who cares about
Exactly.
like
It's
some
like,
college student with blue hair and like rimmed glasses talking about feminism? Like, no, nobody really cares about that. But it's like they prop them up as if this is like the entire picture of like what the left is.
yeah. And not only that, but
Yeah,
oh, so I'll wait for you to finish.
yeah, I'll be right back. I gotta do something.
No worries. I'll take the opportunity to have a read of a chat. Let's have a look what we've got in here. Um, let's see. Sorry, mind blank. We're having a conversation about gender and stuff. Um, Phoenix Rising says biological sex isn't even totally binary, which is very true. Sex is ultimately something we have constructed to help us understand our bodies. And seeing as it isn't, a straight X or Y binary, it's important to, state it as that. It's like you imagine every number between 0 and 1. Um, 0 and 1, they may be more common, but you'd be a fool to say like 0.5 isn't a number, because like obviously it is. But that's the case. It's bimodal rather than binary, and we shouldn't be trying to curtail ourselves to systems which are outdated and wrong. And sex, the sexual side of our bodies is what it is. It doesn't mean that we are X or Y. We're free to express ourselves how we want. Anyway, Oreo's back, so we'll continue what we were talking about. Hello, Oreo. All sorted?
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah, it's sorted.
Excellent. So we were talking about yes, blue-haired feminists and how these reactionaries don't like them. When we like think about what these people are saying, like it's never anything like they try and make it out like they're saying, "Oh, men must all die" or whatever. What they'll actually be saying is something pretty basic and okay, which is like men have to understand their privilege or something, or that there's systemic racism in society. It's just some like basic but good argument to make. And then they're pilloried and slaughtered for it. And what's often the theme with these people is they'll be androgynous, maybe gender non-conforming. Maybe they'll be LGBTQ. Maybe they'll not fit the stereotype of like a straight white man. So they'll be targeted and attacked, which is why when you see one of these people who've like dared to not have a common hair color or whatever, they'll be slaughtered for it. A common example is Milo Stewart. Have you heard of Milo Stewart?
Yeah.
Yeah. They made a video.
She was constantly under attack by Leafy and Pyrocynical. I remember
Yeah.
those days.
I think they're non-binary. They made a video essentially saying that a pretty basic concept that people who are of a privileged background have internalized biases that because of the society around them, they need to unlearn. Which, when you think about it for like 10 seconds, is fairly true. People who are of a certain privilege will have things that they might not have necessarily picked up because of their privilege, and thus should spend time learning. And instead, you see, like you said, Leafy, Pyrocynical, all these people, and all the typical like Sargon, people like him, all descend on Milo, and they're all like, "Oh, you're evil. You're saying this, that, and stuff." And it's an example of a person who isn't who doesn't fit gender binaries and doesn't fit the sort of cis het normalities of society, being targeted for essentially no real reason than making a mildly difficult to understand statement, which isn't really that difficult when you think about it, and being LGBTQ. A lot of these people are targeted in part because they're saying things which don't fit with a right-wing view of society, but also because they're they're LGBTQ. They're not going to fit norms of society. Maybe they're not white. Maybe they're not straight, and that makes them a target. It's not surprising that loads of their memes center around like trying to mock trans people for like looking ugly or whatever, when all it is, it's literally just playing upon basic transphobia and homophobia and stuff.
Yeah. I was just looking at chat. There's somebody in chat named Constant Disappointment.
Are they being a constant disappointment by any chance?
Yeah.
I had a little look at something that was in the chat. And yeah, it's not looking good, is it?
Nah.
Did no one do biology in school? Is it one of these one? Like, is it a turf by any chance? Is it a turf? Because if it is, then they can go now. Let's have a look. Explain not to
I don't know,
be.
because I see like Phoenix and Venus, they're both responding to them, and
The
I'm a
right is favoring
socialist.
women and the left is abandoning them. Well, we'll keep an eye on that. If they keep being silly, then they will have to depart. Um, Turf is a misogynist slur. Yeah, okay, that's confirmed it for me. Yeah, let's go. Not having that here. How's it? Remove. Yeah, let's go. No, there's no. How do I block someone?
Oh, just put. I think it's hide user on
There we go.
channel.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not gonna waste time having people like that in my chat. I want my sort of chat to be nice and pleasant for trans people, not having
Right.
to worry about people like that hanging around. But it's silly, like, but we can. That's a nice little segue into serves actually. Just the it's another. I see it as another tactic of the far right into sort of co-opting language that's used by different people and trying to sort of go in from undercover. It might be sort of a stealth erosion of progress, if that makes sense. So these people obviously aren't feminists because they're not interested in equality or fairness or whatever, and they're not interested in deconstructing unjust hegemonies. They're reasserting cis normativity.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to act like women and men are just these distinct, like non-negotiable, non-fluid categories which you are either aren't or in, ignoring all the signs and all the examples of how this just isn't the case. And
Right.
trying to do things like getting trans people kicked out of bathrooms, trying to deny them medical care. If you actually someone who on Twitter called Casey Explosion, I'm sure you follow them. They're amazing. She does loads of really good research and stuff onto how TERFs are being funded by like extremely right-wing conservative Christian groups in America
Mm-hmm.
to just disrupt trans existence. And bearing in mind, trans people are already coming from a place of not much representation, poor to non-existent healthcare services, massive societal discrimination, and these TERFs, these transphobes, are just building upon it. I think it's actually a disservice to feminists to do good work to call these people TERFs feminists, because really all they're doing is just being anti-trans. I mean, they don't do any work to further gender equality or
Right.
representation. All they do is just harass trans people and slap feminism on their like work. And it's
Right.
like,
Like the whole argument of like, oh yeah, trans women can't have kids. Well, what about like a cis woman that can't have children? Would you not say that she's a woman then? Or like even like an intersex woman. Like I was reading more on that, and they even said like some women who are intersex, um, their vaginal opening might not have developed. So essentially, like they might not have like, I guess technically they might not have a vagina, but they're still a woman, obviously, if that's how they identify, of course. But it's like, well, is that a woman to you? Like I don't understand.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
what is
it's
a
like
woman?
it's an interesting conversation. Like when these people who are like, oh, they've not had a child, they can't give birth. It's like, well, are you just gonna undo like centuries of work to try and get women as being seen more than just like giving birth, just to fit a grotty little
Right.
transphobic argument? And upon any scrutiny, like having that as your parameter for gender is just absurd, because it's like with humans are so much more than just reproducing. That's sort of why we're the most evolved species on the planet and stuff, because we're emotional, intelligent beings which have so much more to us than just like, oh, we will reproduce today, we will feed our young today. It's like it's ridiculous. And in any like in a good society, we'd be encouraging and exploring the whole realm of gender. We'd be sort of having it so that people could explore their own bodies and see it as a good thing. And instead,
Right.
you've got all these awful like conservatives and these fascists just trying to not only shut down conversation, but like make life a living hell for anyone who isn't cis, anyone who's not straight. And that's why it's so important that for one, people like that constant disappointment person just aren't allowed anywhere near the conversation, but also to ensure that left wing circles and left wing movements are firmly pro LGBTQ and safe places for these trans people to be, because
Right.
if we're not deconstructing every unjust hegemony, if we're not making sure every injustice is addressed, then we're not doing our duty as left-wing people properly. Because ultimately that's what being left-wing is, isn't it? It's about deconstructing those problems in society and taking down those hierarchies when they shouldn't be there. So
Right.
yeah, just and I obviously I'm not trans myself,
Right.
but
Same.
it's like, just as I would expect a white person to have my back, as a cis person, it's natural that I should have a trans person's back. And
Right.
like,
Hmm.
there are so many different ways that we can do this, both vocally, physically, just on the internet. Like, there's so many different ways that we can make things better. um it's like, it's not it's a minimum to be doing that, in my opinion.
Right. Hmm.
And I think that was all started just from talking about the straight pride parade, wasn't it? On the topic of that, actually, I think I saw someone who they'd made like a plan, a planned route to the straight pride parade. It was just like a straight line straight into
Yes.
the ocean, which I thought was quite funny.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
it looks like because I'm actually doing a video. I'm working on one still. Uh, it's in response to No Bullshit's Pride Month video he did. It's about the Budweiser cups. Um, I'm not
yeah,
sure if you know about this, but Budweiser said that they're working with charities for Pride in London, and Budweiser decided to make like different cups for different identities within the LGBTQ plus community. And so he I will say this, no bullshit. He kind of does make a good point about corporations, like when they attach themselves to social movements. They mainly could be doing it for profit, and that's usually what it is. Like I think even H Bomber guy noted this in his woke brands video. How corporations really aren't your friends. Like with Gillette, for example, like the Gillette ad.
yeah,
Um, so the message is a good message, like it is, that there are actions that men do, and those actions are essentially wrong. So like, um, not letting a woman finish like her speech or whatever. Like I think it was that scene where they were in like a conference room and she was about to talk, and he's like, "Oh no, I know what you're gonna say," and she kind of looked down
yeah,
in like disappointment. Um, like men grabbing women on the butt, men talking to women like when they really don't want to be bothered, or like if they say no, like just I don't want to talk right now, and keep pressuring them to talk to you. That's kind of wrong. Um, yeah, the message is good, but then again, you also have to think about Gillette. They're owned by Procter and Gamble, one of the largest corporations in the world. They actually own a bunch of brands, which why it doesn't make sense to me why conservatives protested Gillette, but they didn't protest Procter and Gamble. It's like no, Gillette is just one brand. Procter and Gamble is the entire corporation. But they've had violations and they've had investigations, just like any corporation has. Like even with Nike, with the Colin Kaepernick ad, good message. It's just that if you look at what they do, like child labor in sweatshops and the unfair treatment of workers overseas, it's like, yeah, this is bad stuff. Like just know, like, yeah, the message is good, but go beyond the message. And I think he said like, yeah, like I don't understand why these. This is what No Bullshit said. He's like, yeah, I don't understand why these corporations are attaching themselves to like the movement. Looks like they're using them for profit. And I'm like, you kind of have a good point. You kind of do, but then again, it's like, here's the I guess duality with that. It's like, yeah, they could be using it for profit, but I would hope that the proceeds that they make from this month would at least go to a charity that helps, like let's say, homeless LGBTQ plus youth, or like like charities or like organizations that are built to understand gender and sexuality better for society. I would hope that the proceeds would go towards that, but I'm not really sure.
yeah. Well, yeah, like fundamentally, I agree with what you're saying. it's good to have positive LGBTQ messages in society, especially around Pride. But it's important we recognize how cynical it is for corporations to staple themselves onto it and be like, oh, here at what would it be? Here at Google, we've put our nice rainbow flag on our logo this month.
Right.
But, like, they'll happily have all these, Nazis on their platform and sort of just let all these whole people still post their anti-LGBTQ stuff because it makes them money.
Right.
Like you were talking about, Gillette, they are a massive, one arm of a massive corporation.
Right.
They don't care whether gay people are being treated fairly by their housing owner, one more thing, landlords. That's it. They don't care about hiring practices and whether or not they can have access to the same things. They weren't there protesting it when it was, they weren't there fighting for gay marriage until it was profitable to do so. And ultimately, this is just another facet of capitalism. It's just, someone in the marketing department saying, oh, it's more profitable for us to be on board with gay rights and LGBTQ awareness and stuff than it is for us to oppose it. And thus, they'll put all their logos in rainbows, they'll do fancy cups, they'll do all these things that look good, then they'll still go and donate to the anti-LGBT Republican who's going to cut tax on them. They'll still, they'll still allow atmospheres in their workplaces to be, containing harassment and stuff. Like, for instance, I was reading about a trans woman who was being harassed by her manager at a Starbucks, and how the Starbucks are, fighting against her complaints and sort of not doing anything to help her. Because obviously they'll have to pay out a
right.
damage.
It's about money. It's
exactly.
About money.
Yeah, it's always about money. It's why while it's obviously good to celebrate, it's also important to recognize that corporations aren't our friends, and we're never it's not as though if it ever really mattered to it and it was a choice between having more profits or doing the right thing and standing up for LGBTQ people, the corporation's always going to pick the profits. And even if it didn't pick the profits, it would only be doing so because it would think, oh, I'll make more money later on. Like, it's always important to be skeptical and cynical of the actions of corporations.
Right.
Having said that, someone like No Bullshit, I mean, his name alone is just absurd. It's so arrogant. Like, oh yeah, I'm never wrong.
I'm never going to say anything wrong. It's just
yeah. It's just utter crap, really, isn't it? Like, pardon my French. Anyway, like, someone like that doesn't care about LGBTQ rights. I'm fairly certain he's made videos.
And I've actually got clips from his Pride Month video from, I think, last year, and he said some disgusting bullshit, just to put it that way. Like, it was one scene that I remember vividly. It's actually three. So the first one is, it's a oh my God, I think this person might be trans or non-binary. I'm not sure, but the person in the video, this was of course YouTube's Pride Month video from last year. They said that people have always told me to be myself, and they said they really felt like they couldn't do that, but now they can. And he's like, oh yeah, I guess when you say be yourself, you mean to put on this fake girl shit, like makeup and fake nails and fake eyelashes and lipstick. And I'm like, well, that's them being themselves, right? I mean, if that's what they see themselves as, and their whole life they couldn't do this, and finally now they have the chance to be themselves, and I guess this is themselves. They're being themselves. Yeah. The second one is it was. I'm not going to assume this person's sexuality or sexual identity or gender identity, but before she said anything, I think she actually said we have to keep fighting against hatred in society against LGBTQ plus people, and he's like, I'll commend her for being the most normal looking person on this video. I'm like, oh wow. And then the final one is YouTube basically said be yourself at the end of the video. That was basically like the full gist of it. And he's like, I don't know why you're saying be yourself, and like you have trans people in the community who are being anything but themselves. I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, just the whole veneer of like the guy being not bullshit is bullshit. It's quite ironic, really, isn't it, that someone who dedicates themselves to, you know, supposedly being this paragon of truth is anything but. Like the and it just goes to show again the blatant transphobia and general bigotry
Yeah.
of their circles. And I think it touches upon again sort of the importance of pride, really, and also that a platform like YouTube, who enable this stuff on their platform, they could very easily look at that and say, right, we don't want this on our platform, and let's get rid of it. You know, it's not as though Google aren't going to be a multi-billion corporation if they don't let people like no bullshit have their channels up, or at least say, you know, take these videos down, otherwise we will, you know, remove you from the platform.
Right. The easiest thing that they can do to like keep, I guess, to like have them still make profit is demonetize. Because while that person's video or videos are demonetized or their channel, there's other channels out there that are still being monetized and like still making revenue for YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're not gonna see. It's not like millions of people are gonna be like, oh, no, there's no more no bullshit. I cannot use this platform anymore. It's like that's never gonna happen. But you know, YouTube are happy to stick the Pride logo on their, you know, the YouTube logo.
Right.
But they're, you know, happy to facilitate bullying and harassment of people who are targeted by these like right-wing commentators. Like the horrible treatment Milo Stewart gets.
Yeah.
He said, yeah.
The Riley Dennis is another example.
Oh yeah, I feel so bad for her because she just gets like fucking.
Yeah, like,
I guess you could say dogpiled by these people.
Yeah, well, exactly, and it doesn't even matter what she says, like, because even if she made a video just saying, "Oh yeah, I enjoyed the new Star Wars film," you know, she's still gonna get.
She would still get shit on. Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter how many times she points it out and who she, you know, says it to, or who she says, "Oh, you know, I am being targeted by the same large YouTubers." Nothing's going to get done because YouTube would rather, you know, have as much money as possible than lose a tiny little bit for the sake of you know, keeping LGBTQ people happy and alive and safe on your platform, which you are supposedly holding up as an example of pride. It's just absurd. And it, you know, once again speaks volume to what you were saying about how corporations cannot be seen as the sort of parameters of social justice and of making things better. And that goes for feminism too. In fact, it's important that you know, feminism is seen as, you know, a whole scale intersectional movement instead of just like a liberal version of feminism where it's just like sticking a woman as like CEO of Starbucks or McDonald's, whatever, is suddenly equated to gender equality and stuff. When, you know,
and this
feminism...
is where like the whole concept of I think they call it like a diversity hire. It comes in like you might have a corporation that's like, yeah, we want to like look diverse, like, you know, we want to show that we're progressive. So what do? We're gonna try to look for like maybe like a black woman to like be our head of like whatever. Because the college that I go to, I was actually talking to my sociology professor once. She's a really cool person. She was talking about like how the former chancellor of the school, she was a woman, like, and she believes like they just put her in that position because of that, because she had no prior experience in education. And you know, I guess the school, like, they kind of found out and like they kind of played it off like, oh, well, you lied about your credentials and stuff. And she's like, no, I think they knew the whole time and they just put her up there because she's a woman and, you know, they want to look like they're progressive or whatever.
Yeah. It's like it's a very you know, it's not good for the overall health of society to be like, oh, we've solved the societal problem by just, you know, putting XYZ there and it's just suddenly
right.
Like the corporation is still exploiting its female workers with, you know, poor pay and unsafe working conditions.
Yeah, they recently had like strikes. Well, it's not like, because the school I go to is like in a network of schools. it's called City Colleges of Chicago. It's like community colleges or like junior colleges, but they're all connected under like a system. And recently they had, I think they've had this year so far 2 strikes on pay and treatment. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh shit.
yeah, exactly. It's like all these corporations, like if they actually cared like an iota about any of this, they'd be looking internally, fixing their awful working conditions. But they don't. It's just like with Pride, it's just them trying to gain some
Mm-hmm.
capital by looking good to people who they want to look good to, and then not not doing anything about it properly.
Right.
Because if you were to realize the goals of feminism, you would also be realizing the goals of other justice movements, like anti-capitalism, like um, anti-racism, anti-homophobia. All these societal bigotries and problems and discrimination and stuff, they all intersect. They're all part of the same problems of
Right.
hierarchy and hegemony. And sorry, I can't speak there for a second. To truly tackle them, you would need a massive societal reorganization, and that means multi-billion corporations that are hoarding wealth and are perpetuating these problems would be at the window. They'd be being controlled by their workers. They'd be democratic. They wouldn't be able to just pour billions into influencing politics, and they would be void of sexist atmospheres and ingrained sexist hiring practices and stuff. And a corporation looks at that and says, I don't want to do all that. I don't want to be part of the movement that brings us down. So they're
Mm-hmm.
happy to maintain societal sexism, but to look good, to look like to look woke, I guess is the key buzzword these days. They may run an ad that says, oh, we believe in girl power, and it's like
Right.
the message. If it was just the message, oh, I don't know, it's in of itself, girls can do what boys can do just as well. That's good. That itself is
Right.
good,
That's a good
but
message. That's a good
it's
message.
being perpetuated by an actor that is not honest or good. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it is frustrating, and it's important therefore to distinguish between feminism and liberal feminism, pride and corporate pride,
Mm-hmm.
um, racism and corporate racism, anti-racism and corporate anti-racism. All these things can be seen as the capitalist commodification of social justice, and
Mm-hmm.
thus I think the trap that a lot of people fall into is they start opposing feminism or anti-racism movements because of the corporate sort of co-option of it. So while it's good to be cynical, what you don't want to fall into is people who be like, oh, Gillette are bad, therefore this feminism thing is bad too because
Right.
like
Yeah. And I think that's like the trap that most conservatives who are mad at the ad, uh, I think that's the trap that they fell in. Because I did a whole
exactly,
video on that. I kind of took the route because at the time I didn't really know how to I really didn't know the intricacies that well, like I do now. But I was like, maybe Gillette should have touched on toxic femininity. I was trying to relate to my conservative audience too, because I do have some conservatives that watch me, but uh, I guess now that I kind of look back on it now in hindsight, it's like, no, the message was okay. It was a perfectly fine message. It's just that you have to realize that, and I think I also noticed this in the video too, is you have to realize that they're basically doing it for money. It's a money move. This is
yeah,
even with their recent ad with the trans man and his dad, and they were his dad was teaching him how to shave for the first time. I'm like, that's a good message, because there are some trans men who, once they do get on hormones and once they do transition, they do develop facial hair. So, of course, they have to shave if they want to, of course. And that also, and it's like, yeah, that's a good message and all, but it's like, one, Gillette is probably doing this for money, and two, they're probably doing this to tap into maybe a new consumer market,
yeah,
like trans people.
yeah. And they get even when conservatives are like, oh, I'm never shaving with Gillette again, or I'm never wearing Nike again, or any other the other
Right.
nonsense.
They eventually
It's,
buy
yeah,
it.
it's like they'll buy one of the competitors who are owned by the same people anyway, and it's like it
Exactly.
doesn't matter. B, that still publicity they're getting, and they're still being spoken about, and they're still
Yeah.
on every news station been like, oh, the boycott of Gillette, and it's like that's just more attention you're giving them.
Right.
C, like you said, they'll come around and buy it again anyway because turns out they quite like having a Gillette razor or whatever, and turns out they
Right,
actually
because
quite
the
like
thing I
their.
noticed is like with these boycotts of companies, there's like there's four different types of people. So of course you have the first type that's like, oh, they support this. No, I'm not buying them again. Screw this company. There's a second type that's like, well, I think the message is good and I think the company is good, so we're going to defend them. The third type is I don't really care, so I'm just going to continue to buy their products. And then the fourth type is, maybe I could use that. So it's like no matter if you boycott these corporations or these companies, and I could even use the example of Chick-fil-A. Yeah, I agree. They're very terrible. Like when they donated to those charities to support like discrimination against LGBTQ plus people. Yeah, that's terrible. I don't even eat from Chick-fil-A anyway. I think I only had like one sandwich from them, and I was just like, man, I don't see what all the hype is about. So, but it's like even with that, like they're still gonna buy that because of course you have the same type of dynamics. You have uh, the people who are like, screw Chick-fil-A, screw this restaurant, we're never going to buy from them again. And I think that most of them have lived up to their word. But the problem is that you have right wingers who are like, oh yeah, why are you guys mad? They're a company, they can do what they want. This is Chick-fil-A, I'm going to buy Chick-fil-A. You have others that are, well, I don't really care, so I'm just going to keep buying their product. And then you have others that are like, well, I never had Chick-fil-A before, so let me eat, so let me try to eat from there. It's the same dynamics.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like, just if the corporation really thought it was going to harm their work to put out an advert like that, they
Hmm.
wouldn't do it. And
And I
similar,
also, oh,
sorry,
sorry.
no, you go ahead. It's fine.
Oh, I also noticed a random geek in chat. That's also like with movies too. It doesn't even have to be a corporation. It can also be like movies. So like boycott Star Wars, which is now owned by Disney.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
practically
Well,
everything's.
boycott Captain Marvel. Okay, that's owned by Disney too. Okay, go watch Endgame. That's owned by Disney. You're still giving them your money no
Yeah,
matter what.
and it's like these boycotts too. Like Captain Marvel made like how much? Like millions. Like
Yeah,
probably more
wait.
than millions. Like yeah, you're looking at
Captain.
them now. Like Avengers, Star Wars. These are multi-billion-dollar franchises. Like they're not going to be trying too much over like Jim the Conservative skipping the film or whatever.
Wait, hold on. I'll be right back. I gotta do something
No,
again.
no worries, Oreo. Um, I'll check the chat again, and you're all telling me that Captain Marvel made over 1 billion. Which yeah, it's like they're not gonna care that you didn't go and see it. One thing I'm going to bring up in a second of Oreo is the whole woke or woke, go go woke, get woke, go broke, isn't it? Which is just nonsense. And they'll like use an example of this one film that was somewhat feminist or whatever didn't make much money, and it's like it's just utter nonsense because it's how many films have not done very well which weren't feminist or weren't pretending to um, have a political angle. How many films were political and did do well? How many films um, you know didn't necessarily advertise their politics at the forefront of their film, but were political in a different way and still did well? It's like there's more to it. Anyway, what else are we saying in the chat? Quite a lot of you here actually. 12. It's more than I usually have. I guess Oreo is bringing in all the fans today. Let's have a look. Who have we got? Bend my dick cucumber snatch. I've never actually read your name properly. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Venus left. Esper Fitzroy. Loads of you. So quite nice actually. It's like a lot fair view of you. I may have to sadly end the stream soon though, because I'm at work tomorrow. But no, it's been nice having lots of you here to sort of watch this. Clearly, Oreo brings in the crowds. What else have we got here? Objectively subjective. most movies that people enjoy are political. The movies that aren't political don't tend to do very well. Messages sell tickets. Well, exactly. Like, if your film has more to it than just, oh, I am person X and I'm going to go and do Y, then you're naturally going to hook people more. Stories are built on ideas, and often, if your idea has lots of like, lots of different ways it can be interpreted and lots of different styles and stuff put into it, and even just a style but done well, um, you can really draw in a crowd. Um, some random geek, everything is political, even being apolitical is still a political position. Exactly. Like, in our world, especially in the world of capitalism even, anything is commodified. Everything is subject to the rules of the market. Um, everything affects everything else to varying degrees, but still a major way. And when you exist in that environment, to say, oh, I've got no thought, I've got no opinion, identifies that you aren't in a position to be aware of the situation, and be that of your own biases or privileges, or because you just simply weren't aware. By saying that, you are able to exert your privilege in a way to be able to ignore that. Anyway, Oreo, you're back.
Yeah, I
What
have
were
to
you
go
saying?
do something in the kitchen. Yeah.
It's all right. I was just saying, soon I'm going to have to end the stream because
Mhm.
I'm working tomorrow. So they'll know it's too late. But we've still got a bit of time to chat. We were talking about films, weren't we? To Captain Marvel.
Mhm. Yeah, they said it made over 1 billion.
Yeah, exactly. It just goes to show that if you're trying to say like, oh, I'm going to boycott this film and people are going to know that this film is bad because we boycotted it, it's like, well, $1 billion says it's not going to be the case, is it? Like, Disney are $1 billion.
Right.
Actually, is that their profit, or is that just what's it grossed? What is their
Uh,
revenue and stuff?
says Captain Marvel is now Marvel's $1 billion woman, and it's 3.5 weeks or so in theaters. Captain Marvel has hauled in $358 million domestically and 645 million internationally to bring its worldwide total over a little over the 1 billion mark, according to
Okay,
Variety. I
so
mean,
yeah,
oh my God, Variety.
but if that was 3 weeks in, then by now, then yeah, it's definitely made $1 billion.
Yeah,
it just like it just goes to show Disney, like, they're not going to be affected by
right.
Tom the conservative saying, "Oh, I've torn up my ticket. I'm never going to go and see a Disney film again." It's like no one cares about Tom the conservative. Um, and if they genuinely thought that they were going to lose all this money because they've decided to have a woman who's a bit more aggressive than perhaps what some people are used to
I
in their
think like
films.
I think they mostly try to do it based on the Montgomery bus boycotts. So like how I think it lasts for 55 days. I think I don't know. Don't quote
Yeah.
me on that. But they basically didn't take the bus for like a long period of time, and over time the bus company began to lose money, and they realized like, oh shit, well we're losing money, we got to do something. And then that's when they decided to let black people like just sit on the bus wherever they want. I think conservatives, they see that, like, this is just my theory. Like I think they see that, and they like think with corporations like, oh yeah, if we like boycott this corporation, then they're going to start losing money. Well, the problem is with the corporation, it's not like a centralized service like city transport. Like if you stop taking city transport for like a long period of time, of course they'll lose money. They don't have like other, they're not interconnected with like other networks of transport. It's just like that singular one versus a corporation where you'll have multiple, like if, let's say like with Chick-fil-A, like Chick-fil-A is like the corporation. They have like multiple restaurants here and there and there and there and here. And also they're into advertising. So they'll advertise their product on social media. Maybe they'll use you as an advertisement, because if you mention, hey, look, I got a Chick-fil-A sandwich. You take a picture with it, or like your drink or whatever. Or even if you mention Chick-fil-A, they'll get attention, and they'll make money off of that.
Yeah, well, exactly. And it plays into the whole like capitalist framework of stuff as well. Like,
Hmm.
um, because of the nature of like, so certainly in America, where not only are corporations so wealthy, but they're also all like subsidiaries of like other corporations who are bigger. Um,
Hmm.
like how KFC is owned by, is it Yum Brands, who also own like Pizza Hut and other things as well. Um, just
Oh, really?
yeah, like the owners of
I
KFC
didn't know that.
own, I think they also own Pepsi too. Um, it's ridiculous. Like you look, and someone showed me a really good graph, well not a graph, just an image of like different corporations and like how it's all a big web, and they all stem back to like the same 10 or 11 corporations
Hmm.
owning like thousands of little ones, um, and it just goes to show that like you're a boycott of a single corporation for one particular product just isn't an effective way of doing it. If you really wanted to have a societal change, it needs to be sort of organized and
Right.
multi-layered and intersectional and spanning across all the different injustices, and be over an issue that's like a serious wider thing, like not paying workers properly, like unsafe working conditions, like discrimination like you described. Conservatives can't do that because the things they argue for, the things they defend, contribute to that discrimination, contribute to those
Right.
societal problems. And something like, oh, Captain Marvel was like, what were we even boycotting Captain Marvel for again? Like, I
I think it
even,
was Brie Larson, like the actress herself. Like they see her as like someone who's arrogant, someone who's like just generally unlikable. Even though
like,
like the
yeah,
Avengers cast themselves have said like she's a pretty cool person.
yeah. And like the whole dislikable thing is pretty much because she just like, wasn't she just like,
Yeah, she
like, I
said
don't,
something like white male critics shouldn't critique movies that like aren't made for them. So it's like more made for like POC people. So I guess her position was like POC critics should critique POC made movies,
yeah,
not
like some,
necessarily. Yeah.
yeah, like just basic stuff about representation and how sometimes you got to look at your privilege and see how it's affecting how you're viewing things. And suddenly
Hmm.
it's like just then, oh, all men must die. Even a usual reaction that these Muppets have, um, and it's like when you look at it, there's nothing substantial there to be boycotting. There's no real reason to, other than you were made uncomfortable because someone spoke about the societal problems in the world that you happen to also contribute to.
Hmm.
Um, and thus, any boycott like that is not only not going to work because it's a massive corporation, but also because it's a cause that no one's really going to get behind. Who's gonna watch Captain Marvel and be like, oh, I wanted to see it, but Brie Larson boils my blood, and I'm not going to go and
Right.
watch it. It's just nonsense. No, and like, what's it called? I can't think of it now, but there's like Nike, Colin Kaepernick, right? He
Hmm.
some some
Yeah.
people, some one or two like utter fools like burned their Nike trainers or whatever, but no one's gonna destroy their own items of clothing and in order to
Right. And
boycott
even
Nike as
then,
well.
like I think like the better thing to do, right,
Like,
and the better thing that they should have done, like I mean, like I don't support the boycott, but like if you were to I guess let's say like, not buy Nike products anymore, instead of burning your products or like tearing them up or something, you could literally give them to people who need them. Like
yeah,
you could donate them to like homeless shelters or something like that if you don't want the products anymore.
yeah, but also if you're boycotting Nike, right, you're boycotting
Right,
like
they're still
every
making
every
money.
every sporting competition because think about how many things Nike sponsor. So, Super Bowl, Tiger Woods, so that's golf one,
Hmm.
football. I say football is soccer for you, but football,
Right,
like in terms of World
basketball.
Cup, so basketball, baseball, every sport has got Nike all over it, right?
Hmm.
So that's them all gone, and then think about just not even just sports stuff, just things that are made in part by Nike. And I'm pretty sure Nike have other sort of, other companies they probably own as well. So it's like you're essentially boycotting, so much that
Yeah, like I
anything,
think Nike owns Converse. I think they own
yeah,
Converse.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're gonna start just not wearing shoes anymore. Like, oh, I got some nice flip flops I'll wear out. It's just nonsense. Um, and the other thing I wanted to say too is that lots of these people who are like, oh, I've got to boycott it. Look at, say, the Ghostbusters remake, for instance, and say, oh,
Hmm.
that film didn't do very well, therefore our boycott worked. And if you go woke, you go broke. And it's nonsense because for a number of reasons. Firstly, that Ghostbusters film, like, I didn't think it was very good, but it's not very good. Not
Yeah,
it's not bad because it's got women in it and they weren't men. It's bad because it wasn't well written and it wasn't very well
right.
produced. Like is more to it than that. Um, and it's a bit of a shame because I like quite a few of the actors who were in it. Um, but you know, there are so many examples of films that weren't, feminist or whatever and did badly. Um, because think about Battlefield Earth, for instance. Have you seen Battlefield Earth?
No,
I
no.
mean, I'm quite a so bad it's good films, or just bad films are a bit of a sort of a guilty pleasure of mine. Like I quite enjoy them, but there's so many films you can think of which weren't explicitly like political or left wing or left wing or feminist or whatever, which are done badly, and to say that they did badly, a film like Ghostbusters, whatever, did badly solely because like, oh, it was feminist or whatever, and not it's a corporation making a cheap remake of an old classic or whatever.
Right.
Like it's just so uncritical and illogical that it's so obviously them just trying to clutch at straws and say anything. Oh, if you go left wing, you're bad. Trying to think another one. But there's loads of things they say it to, and it's nonsense because like we just said, Captain Marvel, 1 billion, um, 1 billion
Uh,
at the box
yeah,
office.
protest
Like,
Star Wars, and then you watch, then like Captain Marvel comes out, you boycott that, and then it's like, what about Endgame? Oh yeah, let's go watch Endgame. Well, they're still made by the same company.
yeah, yeah. I wasn't Captain Marvel in Endgame as well. Like, surely you'd be boycotting that too, but obviously they
Yeah.
did. So it's just nonsense. Like these people don't have any coherent argument. They're just sort of throwing anything at the wall, seeing what sticks, and just trying to go for it. And at the moment, it's the woke woke go. I don't even know it.
Get
Go.
woke, go.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Which is just nonsense. Um, but they'll say it and they'll believe it themselves and they'll believe that it's doing something. But you know they must know deep down that it's just not the case because there's no way like Disney are paying any attention to them other than like looking in headlines and thinking, oh, it's a bit of extra web traffic for us. Um, which is why also they all say like Hollywood's run by liberals and stuff, and it's all like a left wing hub and stuff. When it's anything but.
Right.
Um,
They're more so like, I'd say they're more of neoliberal, if anything.
yeah, yeah, it's like
But
it's
Hollywood's always been like a little, I guess, like you could say liberal. Like I'd say like it mostly started around the Great Depression when they realized like the economy was shit and like, oh yeah, we have to kind of like do something. So they kind of more advocated for liberal positions. And then even uh, during Nazi Germany. So since Hollywood mostly had like I think like Jewish producers and directors and actors and stuff, they felt like that was a stand that they had to take against it. And um, I guess even more starting to see like black actors and directors come in. That's when they began to have like more of a left, well, not
yeah, yeah,
yeah, left wing like beliefs and
like
stuff.
liberal. I think is probably the better
Yeah,
word for it.
liberal. Yeah.
They they're obviously it's quite a wealthy place. Um, and certainly like today, you look at the power of Disney, you look at
Hmm.
like the main studios that like if you look at the highest grossing films list, all of them are made by studios who are extremely wealthy, like the Warner Brothers, Comcast, Paramount. Uh,
Sony,
yeah, yeah,
Columbia.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like all just loaded. Um,
You okay?
oh gosh, I am now. But the idea that any of them would be like down for left wing policies of like wealth redistribution and
Hmm.
funding social programs and stuff is just nonsense. Which is why they're at best they're liberal in the way that Hillary Clinton is liberal, but she gives loads of. She's like an honorary member of the Walmart Corporation, and she's good friends with the Kissingers, and she's like responsible for numerous war crimes and horrible like imperialist actions abroad and stuff. It's clearly just a way of a subtle way of also moving the Overton window right, because it's like if you're presenting Hollywood and stuff as liberal and left wing, then you can more easily present far right ideas as just right wing.
Yeah.
And it's all part of that wider societal conditioning. Just quickly, it's now past midnight in the UK, so I was wondering if we could sort of come to a sort of conclusion to our stream, like a nice sort of rounding off sort of set of themes we could end on, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's cool.
Brilliant. What do you suggest then? What do you want to close with for this stream? I put you on the spot, haven't I? Sorry.
Yeah, I think we kind of touched everything.
Yeah. No, it's been nice actually. It's been nice being able to speak to you in person.
Oh, thanks. You too.
And certainly to chat about stuff on the channel, and hopefully we can do it again at some point, because I'm sure there are many things we can talk about. I've noticed there's a Star Wars poster on your wall back there.
Yeah, I got the episode 1 poster up.
Phantom Menace, controversial. Some people would say it's not one of the good ones.
Yeah, it was like because I think General Mills cereals were like I think this is when The Force Awakens came out. They basically like put like Star Wars posters like in the boxes, and I had like Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and like when I was done with the box, like, and it was a poster, and that was it. So
yeah, no, it's it'd be interesting to talk about that actually, and maybe a more like film and TV and stuff orientated for stream. Should be quite nice.
Yeah.
But no, it's been great having you on, Oreo, and we'll definitely have to try and do this again at some point.
Yeah, that would be cool.
So yeah, like I said, somehow I have more subscribers than Oreo, even though he puts a lot more effort into his videos than I do. So
yeah, I've only been on YouTube for like I think 9. It's going on 9 months. Like I've only been on for 9 months. So
well, if you're some for whatever reason, if you're subscribed to me and not to Oreo, make sure that's changed by the end of this.
Yeah.
And also go and follow him on Twitter too. But yeah, no, it's been great having you on, Oreo, and hopefully we can do this again next time.
Right.
Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you all another time.
Bye.